The day my son Andrew held the $85 million lottery ticket in his hand, the first thing he and his wife wanted to do was kick me out of the house. "We don't need your pension anymore. Just go die somewhere else." They were so certain they were right, I almost felt sorry for them. But when I laughed, when I stood there with that ridiculous grin on my face, they went pale. I looked at them, held up the ticket and said, "Sweetie, did you even read whose name is on that ticket?" I've got to say, it felt damn good to have the upper hand for once. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably wondering how a widower like me, at 68 years old, could be sitting on $85 million. Well, let me take you back a bit, to 3 weeks earlier, on a dreary December morning here in Wheat Ridge, Colorado. It was just a typical Friday for me, one I'd been living for the last 32 years. I walked to Henderson's Market, same as I'd done every Friday for as long as I could remember, to buy my lottery ticket. Same numbers, too. Every week, year after year, without fail. The numbers meant something to me. 7 for the day I married Linda, 14 for the day Andrew was born, 23 for our wedding anniversary, 31 for the house number where we built our family, and 45 for the years we spent together. 18 for Andrew's age, when he graduated high school. They were the numbers that had been a part of me for so long. And now, as absurd as it sounds, those numbers would become my weapon of mass destruction. "Morning, Mr. Hayes," Jimmy Murphy called out from behind the counter as I entered the store. At 25, he still remembered when I used to bring Andrew in for penny candy. "The usual?" "Yep," I said, handing him my $5 bill. "Same numbers, Jimmy, always." He printed my ticket, the sound of the machine clicking like a countdown in my mind. I took the ticket, tucked it into my purse, and turned to leave. "Good luck, Mrs. Hayes," Jimmy called after me. "Thanks," I muttered. But honestly, I wasn't holding my breath. I'd played those same numbers for so long that it felt more like a ritual than anything else. A routine that helped me get through the days after Linda passed. A little bit of hope in a world that had felt a lot emptier without her. As I walked back home, the familiar December chill in the air, I passed the house Linda and I had lived in for over 40 years. The new owners had painted it yellow. Linda would have hated that. She always said, our white house, with the black shutters, was classy. It stood for what we were hard-working, dignified people. But the irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, walking past the house that had been a home, and now it was just another property. The person who once called that house home, the person who'd fought alongside me to build it, was gone. And here I was, living with my son and his wife, treated like an afterthought, a burden they had to carry. I could see Madeline's BMW parked in the driveway when I reached the house where I was staying now. I didn't even feel comfortable calling it my home anymore. As I walked through the back door, I heard Madeline's voice floating down from the kitchen. "Robert, is that you?" She always called me Robert, even though I hated it. It made me feel like I was just a shadow of my former self. "It's just me," I called back, hanging my coat on the hook by the laundry room. It was the same hook where Andrew used to hang his Little League jersey, where I used to hang my work shirts, where I used to feel like I belonged. But that was before everything changed. I didn't mention it out loud, but deep down I wanted to scream, "Sorry for existing in your precious house." But instead, I just kept quiet. I'd learned over the last 2 years that sometimes survival means swallowing your pride and keeping your dignity intact, even when both were getting harder to hold on to. Things hadn't always been this way. When Linda was alive, we had a full house. Andrew would come home from college, or even just stop by to visit on weekends. It was a house full of life. But now, the house felt empty, cold, and I felt like I was the one who had to fill the space, taking care of everything, doing the cleaning, and watching the grandkids, while Madeline and Andrew went off to their events, their dinners, their lives. They didn't ask for my help, they just assumed it. And it seemed to me, the longer I stayed, the more they took for granted. I remember the day Linda died like it was yesterday. It was a Tuesday in December, just over 2 years ago. A simple funeral, quick, almost as though they were all relieved it was over. The whole thing felt like a dream, like it wasn't really happening. 45 years of marriage, reduced to a 90-minute service and a lunch on paper plates with store-bought sandwiches. Andrew gave a nice eulogy, of course, about how Linda was a great wife and mother, but I could tell it wasn't the truth. At least, not the whole truth. I saw the way he looked at his watch, the way he kept checking his phone during the ceremony. I should have known then. Grief makes you blind, I guess. It blinded me to the fact that Andrew and Madeline were circling, looking for an opportunity, and that opportunity came right after Linda was buried. "You can't stay in that big house alone, Mom," Andrew said to me as we drove back from the cemetery. "It's just not practical." I wasn't thinking clearly. I wasn't even listening to the words he was saying. I was thinking about the years Linda and I had spent together, the house we built, the life we dreamed about. "I've been managing just fine for 65 years, I replied, staring out the window, trying to ignore the growing pit in my stomach. "I think I can handle a few more." But Madeline chimed in from the front seat. "At your age, Robert, those things become dangerous. What if you fall? What if something happens, and no one finds you for days?" I almost believed her. The concern in her voice sounded so real, so genuine. But it wasn't. It was just a way to control me, to make me feel like I had no choice, no power. And that was the first hint that something wasn't right. Something had shifted in their attitude. They didn't care about me the way they used to. They didn't care about my independence, my dignity, or my well-being. They just cared about their lifestyle. But I didn't know then what I know now, that $85 million was about to change everything. I won't lie to you, it was hard to swallow the fact that Andrew and Madeline had been using me. But that's exactly what they were doing. They weren't even subtle about it anymore. At first, I thought it was just their way of coping with the loss of Linda. Maybe they felt bad for me, maybe they wanted to help, but as the months went by, it became clearer than ever that their help was really just a form of control. When Linda passed, Andrew insisted I move in with them. He said it was to help me out and keep me company. But the more I stayed in their home, the more I realized it wasn't just out of concern for me, it was because they needed my social security check. They weren't just offering a place to stay, they were charging me. It started out small. A few weeks in, they casually mentioned how much it was costing them to keep me there. "Robert, you know you're using the kitchen, the laundry room, the whole house," Madeline said one morning over coffee. "We're just trying to make it fair." Fair? What did that even mean? They told me I was responsible for a portion of the household expenses, and at first, I didn't think much of it. I thought, okay, that's reasonable. But when they handed me the itemized list, $2,200 for rent on the guest room, $300 for utilities, and another $400 for food, it hit me. They were charging me more than I was getting from my Social Security check. I was paying them for a roof over my head, for the privilege of being a guest in my own son's house. And they didn't even think twice about it. I didn't know what was worse, that they had the audacity to ask, or that I was too scared to say no. At first, I thought I could handle it. After all, what was I supposed to do? At 68, with only a small monthly income, finding a place to live was nearly impossible. But as time passed, I started to notice things. Andrew and Madeline began to make more demands. "Robert, can you watch the kids this weekend? Madeline and I are going out," Andrew would say. "Robert, could you pick up our dry cleaning while you're out? I'm too busy with work," Madeline would ask. It wasn't a request anymore. It was expected. I wasn't just living with them, I was doing everything they didn't want to do. The cooking, the cleaning, taking care of the grandkids whenever they needed time alone. At first, I told myself it was just temporary. I told myself that as soon as I felt better, as soon as I got over the grief, I'd be able to move out and get back on my feet. But then, the months turned into a year, and it became harder and harder to see a way out. I felt trapped, and I knew deep down they were fine with that. But it wasn't just the money. It was the way they treated me. I had given up my home to move into theirs, hoping they would give me the comfort and care that Linda would have wanted me to have. But instead, I was treated like a burden. A problem that needed to be solved. A problem they could easily ignore when it was convenient. I remember the first time Madeline mentioned moving me downstairs. It was in the spring, about 6 months after I'd moved in. She was making dinner, chopping vegetables for a salad, and casually said, "You know, we've been thinking. We should convert the basement into a little suite for you. It'll be nice, with your own space and a separate entrance. You won't have to worry about climbing stairs." I had always prided myself on being independent. I raised Andrew very well from a young age, and I did the best I could with the resources I had. Now, I was being treated like someone who couldn't even live without constant supervision. The basement, it felt like a cage. I kept quiet, of course. What could I say? If I argued, they'd just tell me it was for my own good, that I should be grateful. That's how they always put it. We were just trying to help Dad. By the time summer came around, it wasn't just Madeline's requests, it was her demands. They needed me to pick up extra chores, babysit the kids more often, take care of the housework without being asked. And, of course, none of this was compensated. It wasn't supposed to be. I was family. But in their eyes, I was also the help. One morning, about a month before I found out about the lottery win, I woke up to a note on the kitchen table. It was an itemized bill detailing how much they expected me to pay for living expenses. This wasn't just for the guest room. This was for everything: utilities, groceries, even cleaning supplies. It added up to over $2,000. I stared at the note, feeling the blood drain from my face. That was more than my entire Social Security check. I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal. They were my family. But now, it felt like they were just using me. I had raised Andrew. I had loved him, supported him, and done everything in my power to give him a good life. And this was how he repaid me? With fees and demands, like I was nothing more than a stranger paying rent? I wanted to scream, but instead, I did what I always did. I swallowed my pride, forced a smile, and did what they asked. After all, what else was I supposed to do? But something inside me had started to shift. I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I knew something had to change. And when I saw the ticket in my purse that night, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't have to live this way much longer. I used to think grief made everything foggy. Turns out, it can make some things sharp as glass. It happened on a Saturday night in early spring, one of those Denver evenings when the air is cool but the sky wants you to believe summer is already parked around the corner. Madeline had a handful of her friends over public relations, folks with shiny teeth and bigger laughter than the jokes deserved. The charcuterie board could have fed a small choir, and the wine bottles looked like they'd been chosen for the labels more than the contents. I stayed out of the way like I always did, moving quietly through the kitchen with a dish towel, keeping the sink empty and the counters clear. Old habits. Linda used to call me her silent stagehand. I didn't mind the title. There's dignity in making things work for the people you love. Only this wasn't love. Not anymore. I heard it before I saw it. That brittle little laugh Madeline gets when she's about to say something she thinks is clever enough to be written on a coffee mug. Honestly, she told her friend across the island, it's like having live-in help that pays us. The room laughed. I did not. I stood in the doorway with a tray of glasses and let the words settle. They didn't sting right away. They sank. They found an old, soft place inside me and pressed. Her friend leaned in with a conspirator's smile. How did you swing that? Madeline tapped her temple. Systems. You set expectations early. It's just household math. He uses the kitchen, the laundry, the hot water. Everybody contributes. And he loves being useful. Gives him purpose. Gives him purpose. I put the tray down and backed into the hallway. Somewhere in the living room, a jazz playlist tried to sound expensive. In the foyer mirror, I caught a glimpse of myself, shirt ironed, shoes clean, hair combed like Linda always liked it. A decent man trying to be decent. I thought of the day Andrew and Madeline handed me the line item sheet, $2,200 for the guest room, $300 for utilities, $400 for groceries, and then the miscellaneous column that crept like ivy. Household math, they called it. Family, I called it then. Something else entirely now. I went upstairs to the room they still insisted on calling the guest room. On the dresser sat Linda's little cedar box, the one that always smelled faintly of lemon oil and thyme. Inside was my pocket notebook, cheap spiral, blue cover, the kind that lives in a back pocket and survives the wash more often than you'd expect. I had started jotting down numbers a few months after the funeral. Nothing fancy. Dates, amounts, groceries I bought. Utility bills I paid when the household card was maxed out. Hours with Emily when their dinner plans ran long and their babysitter fell through for the 5th time in a row. I turned to a fresh page and wrote in a careful hand, like a man carving letters into wet cement. 2 years of contributions, 2 summers of childcare weekends, 2 winters of shoveling sidewalks before dawn. The totals weren't exact yet, but they didn't have to be. Truth doesn't always need decimals to make its case. Downstairs, the party lifted into that late phase when people feel braver than they are. I heard Andrew's voice, my son, my boy, telling a story I knew by heart, the one about how he made a tough call at work and saved the firm a pile of money. His laugh was large, but there was a rattle in it I recognized, the sound of a man hoping his confidence would show up if he spoke loud enough. Sunday morning arrived, draped in politeness. Madeline poured coffee like nothing had happened. Andrew asked about the Rockies, like he had watched the game. I said little, which is easier than saying what you really think. Around noon, Madeline spread papers across the dining table, brochures, floor plans, a glossy catalog with cheerfully staged pictures of finished basements. "We've been dreaming a little," she said, with that bright, managerial tone that doesn't leave room for questions. A private suite downstairs. Small kitchenette. Your own entrance, so you can come and go without all those stairs. It's about safety, Rob. We worry. Andrew nodded quickly, eyes on me. It's a good plan, Dad. More independence for you. More space for everyone. Safety. Independence. Those words can be life rafts. They can also be handcuffs. I ran my finger along the blueprint, a rectangle labeled bedroom, another labeled living area, a modest square for kitchenette, and the tiny box where they had drawn bathroom in letters that looked apologetic. I could smell the basement in my mind, cool concrete and old paint, the hum of a water heater, the sound of footsteps overhead. Madeline slid a cost estimate forward. If we choose the value package, we can do this for less than most folks spend on a used car. If we upgrade a little, it still makes sense. It's not about the money. It's about creating a sustainable situation. There it was again, systems, packages, sustainability, corporate words dressed up for family supper. "I'll think about it," I said. They took that as agreement. People hear what they want when you speak softly enough. That afternoon, Emily found me in the garage, measuring a wobbly shelf I planned to fix. She is 12, and already knows how to read a room better than most adults. "Does Mom want you to live underground?" she asked, eyes wide, half joking, half afraid. I smiled. "Your mom wants everybody exactly where she can keep an eye on them." Emily frowned, then shrugged, then did what kids do, reached for hope. "When I'm older," she said, "you can live with me. I'll make you pancakes every morning." "I'll hold you to that," I told her, and meant it. On Friday, I walked to Henderson's Market, like I had for 3 decades. The wind coming off the Front Range carried that early hint of mountain cold, the kind that slips under your collar and makes you feel more awake than you planned to be. Jack Henderson was stacking oranges into a pyramid with too much ambition. "You're late," he said. "Your numbers were asking about you." Couldn't decide whether to get fancy and buy 2 tickets, I told him. Don't you go messing with the universe, Jack said, printing the slip with a practiced flick. You stick with what brought you to the dance. I paid and held the ticket a second longer than usual, the paper warm from the machine. The numbers looked like home: 7, 14, 23, 31, 45, and that stubborn little Powerball that had never stopped daring me to believe. I tucked the ticket behind Linda's photo in my wallet, the one where she's laughing with her whole face and holding up a pie like a trophy. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table after the house went quiet, lights low, the kind of quiet that used to feel peaceful when Linda was around, and now mostly felt like absence with manners. I laid out my notebook, my stack of grocery receipts, and the utility bills with my handwriting on the memo lines. I wrote the words room and board on a fresh page and drew a line down the center. On one side, I listed what I paid. On the other, what I did. Somewhere in the middle, I drew an arrow and wrote respect. Linda would have liked that. She believed in naming things. A memory surfaced, uninvited Linda at the sink, sleeves rolled, saying, "Rob, you can forgive people and still change the locks." She had a way of telling the truth, dressed as a joke, so it didn't scare you off. I could almost hear her voice now, not scolding, not pleading, just steady. See what's in front of you, then act. So I made a promise, not out loud, not to Andrew or Madeline, they wouldn't have heard it anyway, but to Linda and to the man I still wanted to be. I promised I would stop pretending gratitude was the same as acceptance. I promised I would stop paying rent on a life that did not include me. I promised I would draw a line where there needed to be one, then stand on the right side of it, even if my knees shook a little. Upstairs, the house settled into sleep. Somewhere, a pipe ticked. Outside, the wind picked up and rattled the aspen leaves like a handful of nickels in a tin can. I closed the notebook, slid the ticket deeper into my wallet, and turned off the lamp. The mask had slipped. I had seen what was underneath. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. In the morning, I told myself, I'd start acting like a man who had choices. I didn't know yet that the universe was already moving the pieces, that fate had been patient, and, in its own odd way, precise. But I knew this much. The next time someone handed me a blueprint for a basement, I would hand them back a plan for my life. And I would mean it. The week slipped by like all the others. Same chores, same sidelong looks across the dinner table, same reminders that I was a guest in the house I paid to live in. But Friday came again, as it always did, and with it my ritual walk to Henderson's Market. The air in Wheat Ridge was sharp that morning, the kind of December chill that makes every breath sting just enough to feel alive. I pulled my wool cap down over my ears and thought about how Linda used to scold me for wearing the same one year after year. "Buy a new hat, Rob," she'd say with a laugh. "You can't take your money with you." Funny how her voice still followed me down the sidewalk. Jack Henderson was behind the counter, as usual, stacking candy bars in neat little rows. He grinned when he saw me. "Right on schedule," he said. "Don't tell me you're changing your lucky numbers." "Not a chance," I replied, handing over my $5 bill. 32 years, Jack. Why mess with tradition?" The machine clicked, spit out the ticket, warm and smelling faintly of ink. 7, 14, 23, 31, 45. Powerball 18. I tucked it behind Linda's photograph in my wallet, same as always, then wished Jack a good day and stepped back out into the cold. That night, after Andrew and Madeline had gone to bed and the house was silent except for the hum of the furnace, I sat in the small upstairs room they called mine. I flipped through my notebook, the one filled with scribbled numbers, grocery totals, utility payments, hours spent babysitting Emily. I added the latest figure, $2,200 for rent. My pencil lingered over the page, pressing so hard it nearly tore the paper. I closed the notebook and turned on the small television propped up in the corner. Channel 7, 10:59 p.m., the lottery drawing. It was habit by now, watching the ping-pong balls dance while I muttered the same little prayer to Linda. I didn't expect anything. I never did. The announcer smiled too brightly, as they always do, and began reading off the numbers. Tonight's winning numbers are 7, 14, 23, 31, 45, and the Powerball is 18. I froze. My breath caught. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. My eyes flicked to the slip of paper on the nightstand. I picked it up with trembling hands and held it next to the screen. Every number matched. All of them. 7, 14, 23, 31, 45. Powerball, 18. The room tilted. My heart pounded in my ears. I sat down hard on the bed, clutching the ticket like it might vanish if I loosened my grip. 32 years of buying the same numbers, week after week, rain or shine, and now, they had hit. $85 million. I whispered it out loud, as if speaking it would make it real. 85 million. For the first time in years, I laughed. Not the polite chuckle I used at Andrew's dinner table, not the forced smile at Madeline's friends' jokes. A real laugh. Deep, shaky. A sound pulled up from somewhere I thought had been buried with Linda. My first instinct was to run downstairs, wake Andrew and Madeline, and share the news, to shout it from the rooftop. But then I remembered the blueprint on the dining table, the neat little square labeled basement suite. I remembered Madeline's laugh at her party Live and Help that pays us. I remembered the note itemizing every cent they expected from me, right down to the detergent I used to wash my own clothes. The laugh turned bitter on my tongue. This wasn't their win. This was mine. I slipped the ticket back into my wallet, behind Linda's photo, her smile as steady as ever. "Looks like we finally caught a break, honey," I whispered. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the ticket like a stone in my pocket. My mind raced with possibilities. Freedom, independence, a life that didn't require me to beg space in my own family's home. By dawn, I had the beginnings of a plan. Saturday morning brought the usual chaos. Emily's voice and laughter filled the living room as the girl tried to beat Andrew at a board game. Madeline bustled around the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, discussing yoga classes and salon appointments. I was making coffee when she opened my purse, looking for a stack of grocery coupons I'd clipped. And that was when she found it. "Rob?" Her voice trembled. "What is this?" I turned to see her holding the slip of paper, eyes wide, color draining from her face. My stomach dropped, but my expression stayed calm. "That's my ticket," I said simply. "The one I've bought every week for 32 years. Madeline's hands shook as she pulled out her phone and started frantically searching. "Andrew! Get in here!" she screamed. Within moments, Andrew came running, hair tousled, shirt half-buttoned. "What's going on?" Madeline shoved the ticket at him. "Look at the numbers. Look at last night's drawing." Andrew's eyes flicked between the ticket and the glowing phone screen. His mouth opened, closed. His face went pale. The silence in the kitchen stretched so long I could hear the refrigerator humming. Finally, Andrew looked up, voice barely a whisper. "Dad, do you realize what this means?" I smiled faintly, tucking my hands into my pockets. "Oh, I realize." And as I stood there, watching the panic and greed bloom across their faces, I knew for certain my days of being used were over. The kitchen turned into a storm within seconds. Madeline paced in frantic circles, waving her phone like a flag. $85 million. Do you hear me, Andrew? We won. We're set for life. We? I thought, standing by the coffee pot, watching her spin herself dizzy. Andrew took the ticket back from her, squinting at the numbers, then at the phone screen, back and forth like he didn't trust his own eyes. "This is real," he muttered. "This is actually real." His voice was shaky, more fear than joy. Meanwhile, Emily wandered in from the living room holding her board game piece in her hand. "Are we rich now?" she asked, her eyes bright with hope. Madeline swooped her up, twirling her around. Yes, sweetheart, we are very rich. We'll never have to worry about money again. I stayed quiet, sipping my coffee, letting the scene unfold. I felt like a guest at my own execution, except I knew something they didn't. Andrew finally looked at me. His eyes were wide, a mix of excitement and panic. Dad, we need to call a lawyer. We need to figure out taxes, investments, all of it. This changes everything. Madeline cut in, already planning. Forget the basement. With this kind of money, we can buy a bigger house. Or better yet, one of those fancy retirement communities for Dad, the ones with pools and medical staff. He'll be more comfortable there, and we'll have our space back. There it was. Even with millions flashing before their eyes, their first thought was how to get rid of me. Not a word about gratitude. Not a single thought about who had actually purchased the ticket. I set my coffee mug down with deliberate care, the sound sharp against the countertop. The room went still. There's just one small detail we should probably address, I said. They both turned to me, impatient, like parents humoring a child. The lottery ticket, I continued calmly, is in my name. The silence that followed was heavier than any I had ever known. Madeline blinked, confusion giving way to horror. What do you mean? I held out my hand. After a long pause, Andrew placed the ticket in my palm. I slipped it back into my wallet, behind Linda's smiling photo, like tucking a sword into its sheath. I mean, I said, voice steady, that I bought this ticket. With my money, using the same numbers I've played for 32 years, which makes it mine. Madeline's face flushed, a dangerous red creeping up her neck. But we're family. That money, it changes everything for all of us. No, I said, straightening, feeling taller than I had in years. It changes everything for me. The weight of the words hung there. Andrew opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Dad, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll handle this together. That's what families do. I almost laughed out loud. Handle it together? Like when you charged me $2,200 a month to live in your guest room? Like when you drew up plans to shove me into your basement and called it independence? Like when Madeline bragged to her friends that I was live-in help who paid for the privilege? Madeline's carefully crafted smile cracked. She looked at Andrew as if begging him to say something, anything to fix this. Andrew's voice came out soft, pleading. Dad, you're emotional. This is too big for one person. You need help managing it. I leaned in, meeting his eyes. I managed to raise you. I managed to build a marriage that lasted 45 years. I managed to pay every bill, fix every leaky pipe, and keep a roof over our heads without anyone telling me I was incompetent. I think I can handle this. The room fell into stunned silence. Even Emily, standing by the fridge with wide eyes, seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. Madeline finally broke, her voice sharp. You can't just take all of it for yourself. That's not fair. I turned toward her, my hand resting on my wallet where the ticket sat safe. Fair? I said quietly. Fair would have been treating me like family instead of a burden. Fair would have been letting me live in dignity instead of charging me rent in my own son's house. This is more than fair. This is justice. The refrigerator hummed. A clock ticked on the wall. Nobody moved. I picked up my coffee again, took a slow sip, and set it down with care. Then I walked past them, leaving them frozen in their own kitchen. The realization sinking in. The $85 million they thought was theirs had never belonged to them at all. And from that moment, everything began to change. By Sunday morning, the secret was gone. Word travels fast in Denver and faster in Wheat Ridge. Someone at Henderson's Market must have talked, because by the time I came downstairs for coffee, there were 3 news vans parked outside the house. Their satellite dishes stuck up like metal weeds, cameras pointed at the front door, waiting for the mystery winner to step out. Madeline was already in full battle mode. Hair curled, makeup on, a silk blouse she usually saved for church. Every time the doorbell rang, she rushed to answer it, smiling wide and telling reporters, "Mr. Hayes is resting, but as her family, we're just thrilled for this blessing in all our lives." All our lives. Those words rattled around in my head like loose change. Andrew hovered nearby, pale and restless, his golf shirt wrinkled, his voice cracking every time he tried to reassure her. "We've got to control the narrative," he muttered, as if the cameras belonged to him. "If Dad says the wrong thing, if—" That was the word that made me chuckle. By mid-morning I couldn't stand another minute of being paraded as a silent prize. I grabbed my jacket, slipped my wallet into the pocket, and headed for the front door. "Dad, wait," Andrew hissed, stepping in front of me. "You don't understand what this kind of media attention can do. You're not equipped." "Equipped?" I asked, my voice low but sharp. "Son, I've been equipped to handle life for nearly 7 decades. I think I can manage a front yard." I opened the door and stepped outside. The cold air hit me full in the face. Microphones shot out like spears. Questions flew from every direction. "Mr. Hayes, how does it feel to win $85 million? What will you do with the money? Is it true you've been playing the same numbers for 32 years? I raised my hand and the crowd hushed just enough. "I'm very grateful for this blessing," I said, voice steady. "And as for what I plan to do, I plan to live independently and make my own choices for the first time in 2 years." A reporter called out, "What do you mean by that, Mr. Hayes?" I looked back at the house where Andrew and Madeline stood, framed in the doorway, their smiles stiff as frozen paint. "I've been paying $2,200 a month to live in my son's guest room," I said clearly. "I've provided free childcare, cooked meals, cleaned their house. They were planning to move me into the basement because my presence in their main living space was inconvenient. That ends today." The gasps from the reporters were followed by a storm of new questions. Cameras flashed, microphones crowded closer, but I had said what I needed to say. I walked past them, got into my old truck, and drove away while the cameras whirred. In the rearview mirror, I saw Madeline's perfect smile crumbling, Andrew's hand gripping her arm like a man steadying himself on a sinking ship. My destination was an office in downtown Denver, mahogany desk, leather chairs, and a man I trusted. Charles Benton had been my lawyer for years, and before that, a friend Linda and I had played cards with on summer evenings. 72 years old now, with thinning gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He rose when I walked in. "Rob," he said warmly. "Congratulations. Linda would be proud." I sat across from him, relief spreading through me. "Feels strange, Charlie. Like the universe finally remembered my name." He smiled, but then his expression sobered. "There's something you need to know. Something Linda made me promise to keep quiet about unless circumstances called for it." I frowned. "What circumstances?" "If your family ever tried to take advantage of you financially." He pulled a thick folder from his desk drawer. 6 months before she passed, Linda hired a private investigator. She suspected Andrew and Madeline were living beyond their means. She wanted to be sure you'd be protected. He laid the documents in front of me. Credit card statements, mortgage records, 2 car loans, business losses, column after column of red ink. "They're in significant debt, Rob," Charles said softly. "Your Social Security checks, the money you've been handing over every month, it's been keeping them afloat." I stared at the papers, my jaw tight. So Linda had known. She had seen what I refused to. Charles placed another envelope on the desk. "And this. A trust she established in your name. $750,000, earning interest for the past 2 years. She wanted you to have a cushion in case Andrew and Madeline ever crossed a line." I couldn't speak for a moment. My throat ached. Linda, my Linda, had been protecting me even from the grave. Finally, I looked up. "She knew they'd do this to me." "She suspected," Charles corrected gently. "She also believed you'd eventually see the truth, and now you have." I leaned back in the chair, the weight of the ticket pressing against my chest, the memory of Linda's voice echoing in my ears. "Rob, you can forgive people, and still change the locks. Charles folded his hands. So, what do you want to do? I let out a long breath, the kind that empties more than just lungs. I want a family meeting. Tonight. I want Andrew and Madeline to hear exactly what I know. And I want them to understand one thing this time. I hold the ledger. By 7 o'clock that evening, the stage was set. I had spent the afternoon at Charles Benton's office, going over every page of the investigator's report, every line of debt, every clause in the trust Linda had created. I carried the folder under my arm like a soldier carrying orders into battle. Andrew and Madeline thought they were walking into a discussion about media strategy. That was the phrase Madeline used when she texted me. We need to align on our media strategy tonight. She arrived first. Laptop tucked under her arm, a binder full of spreadsheets, her smile as polished as glass. Andrew trailed behind her, carrying a bottle of wine like a peace offering. They settled into the living room, Madeline already clearing space on the coffee table to spread her documents. "Rob," she began brightly, "we've prepared a comprehensive plan for managing the winnings. Investments, tax strategies, long-term care, everything you'll need. You'll never have to worry again." I let her talk. Her words poured out smooth and practiced, the way public relations people make bad news sound like an opportunity. Andrew nodded at all the right places, chiming in with lines about sustainability and legacy. They thought they were leading the meeting. When Madeline finally paused to catch her breath, I laid my folder on the table and slid the first document forward. "Before we get into your plan," I said evenly, "let's take a look at your reality." Andrew frowned, picking up the page. His eyes darted over the numbers. The color drained from his face. "What is this?" "Your credit card debt," I replied. $47,000 spread across 6 cards, 2 car loans totaling $18,000, a mortgage underwater by $32,000. "And Madeline, your business has been running at a loss for 8 months straight." Madeline's professional smile cracked. "How dare you dig into our private finances? How dare I?" I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. "How dare you charge me $2,200 a month to live in a guest room? How dare you treat me like unpaid staff while bleeding me dry to service your debts? You thought you were clever, but Linda saw through you. She hired someone to find the truth, and now I have it in black and white." Silence fell heavy in the room. The only sound was the clock ticking on the mantel. Andrew stammered, "Dad, it's not what it looks like. Everyone has financial challenges." "Challenges," I cut in, "are when you tighten your belt, work harder, live within your means. What you've been doing is exploitation. For 2 years you've taken my social security, my labor, and my dignity, and you've called it family. That's not family. That's business, and a rotten one at that." I opened my notebook, the one filled with 2 years of scribbled records, and began reading aloud. $15,600 in so-called household expenses. Approximately 1,200 hours of childcare. 800 loads of laundry. 300 meals cooked. And in return, a room you planned to move to the basement, and the privilege of hearing you joke at parties that I was live in help who paid for the privilege. Madeline's eyes welled, but they were not tears of shame. They were the sharp tears of someone caught. She reached for Andrew's arm, whispering furiously, but I pressed on. "There's more," I said, sliding the final envelope across the table. "Linda established a trust for me. $750,000 waiting in my name. She knew what you were capable of, and she made sure I would never be cornered." Andrew looked like a boy again, shoulders hunched, eyes wide, realizing too late that the ground beneath him had shifted. "Dad, please, we never meant for it to be like this." "You never meant to be caught," I corrected. I stood, smoothing the front of my sweater, feeling taller than I had in years. "This ends tonight. No more checks, no more rent, no more pretending this is family. Tomorrow I'll claim the lottery prize, and the day after that, I'll be gone. You'll face your debts without me, and maybe you'll finally learn the difference between support and exploitation." Madeline's voice rose, brittle and sharp. "You can't just walk out. After everything we've done for you." I met her gaze, calm as stone. "Everything you've done for me? You turned my grief into your business model. You used my love for my son as leverage. That ends now." The room was so quiet I could hear Emily upstairs, humming to herself as she played. I looked at Andrew one last time, and in his face I saw not the boy I had raised, but a man who had sold his soul for convenience. "You underestimated me," I said softly. "And you underestimated Linda. She's still protecting me, even now. That's the kind of family you never understood." I picked up my folder, turned toward the door, and felt the weight of 2 years fall from my shoulders. Behind me, I heard Andrew whisper my name, but I didn't turn back. The reckoning was complete. The next morning I packed my things. It didn't take long. A man doesn't collect much when he lives out of a guest room. A suitcase with my clothes, my worn notebook, and Linda's cedar box. My wallet with the winning ticket tucked safely behind her smiling photo. That was all I needed. When I came downstairs, the house was silent. Andrew and Madeline hadn't spoken a word to me after the family meeting. Their bedroom door had slammed shut, and the muffled sound of arguing went on until late in the night. Now, the only noise was the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. I set my suitcase by the door. "I'll be going," I called out. My voice carried through the halls, but neither of them answered. Maybe they were too ashamed, maybe too angry, or maybe too afraid of what the cameras outside might still be recording. By 9 o'clock, I was at the Colorado Lottery office in downtown Denver. The officials checked the ticket, asked their questions, ran their verifications. When they slid the claim form across the desk, my hands trembled not from doubt, but from relief. For 32 years I had been faithful to those numbers, and now, for the first time in 2 long years, I felt free. I chose the annuity, just as Charles advised. It wasn't about squeezing every penny, it was about stability, security, the kind of steady ground Linda had always wanted beneath our feet. With the trust she had left me and the new fortune I now held, I had more than enough to live with dignity for the rest of my days. That evening I drove north to Boulder, to Maplewood Senior Community. The apartment was small but warm, 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, a balcony that looked out toward the mountains. As I walked through the door, the manager handed me the keys and said, "Welcome home." Home. That word hadn't felt real in a long time. I unpacked Linda's cedar box first, placing it on the dresser where the morning sun would touch it. Then I opened the balcony doors. The mountain air swept in, clean and sharp. I closed my eyes and imagined Linda beside me, her hand slipping into mine the way it always had when we were about to start something new. In the weeks that followed, the newspapers feasted on the story. Elderly father outsmarts greedy son. Wheat Ridge man wins lottery, wins his freedom. The Denver Gazette ran a photo of me walking into the lottery office with Charles by my side. Madeline tried to spin her version of events, but the more she talked, the less people believed her. Neighbors started whispering. Friends pulled away. Their shiny Cherry Creek home soon sprouted a for sale sign, and before long, the bank came calling. Andrew never reached out, not directly. Maybe shame kept him away, maybe pride. But Emily did. One Saturday morning, she showed up at Maplewood with a backpack full of books and that same determined sparkle Linda used to have. "Dad doesn't know I'm here," she admitted, sitting cross-legged on my couch. "But I wanted to see you. I don't care about the money. I just care about you." I hugged her tight, my chest aching with both sorrow and joy. "You'll always have a place here, Em. Always." Life at Maplewood settled into a gentle rhythm. Mornings with coffee on the balcony, afternoons walking the paths with neighbors who had stories just as long and complicated as mine. Evenings spent listening to old records Linda loved. I even started woodworking again in the community shop, hands steady, heart calmer than it had been in years. On Father's Day, Emily came back with a plate of pancakes she made herself. "Told you I'd keep my promise," she said with a grin. We ate together at the little kitchen table, laughter echoing in the walls of a place that finally felt like mine. That night, as the sun dipped behind the Rockies, I sat on the balcony and thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the basement plans, the rent sheets, and then the justice, the ticket, the trust, the truth, spoken out loud for all to hear. Linda's words floated back to me, clear as the mountain air. Justice delayed isn't justice denied. Sometimes it's just better timed. I smiled, looking at the horizon glowing with the last light of day. She had been right all along. The timing was perfect. For the first time in years, I was not a tenant, not a burden, not live-in help that paid for the privilege. For the first time in years, I was simply myself.